I want to preach about, I knew things would be getting crazy near the last days. And I didn't know it'd be this crazy. And Christianity, it's becoming a very divisive, I guess you say. A lot of things going on, very, very, very unbiblical. The day of the leather-lung preachers, where preachers would on Mondays, they couldn't even talk because they done throw their throat out on Sundays. Those days seem to be gone, and now churches are resorted to do tricks and gimmicks to get people in. I wouldn't be surprised 10 years down the road if we make it that long and they won't have bounce houses in churches and roller coasters, amusement parks to try to get people in. It's like they do competitions. And, we see that there's a lot of, like I said, gimmicks and tricks. Now, I have no problem with preachers wearing sweatshirts if they want to wear sweatshirts and the tight pants, to be cool and look cool. The Bible didn't say anywhere that we had to wear suits and ties. I wear suits and ties because I like them, and I get a good price on them and everything. I'm not being up here fancy. But, a lot of those preachers that have the sweatshirts on and skinny pants. I got a Facebook site, and it's showing it shows their shoes, and they're wearing like $1,000 shoes, $2,000 shoes. I'm like, you might have a problem with that. It's their business. I kind of don't know why a preacher would wear $2,000 shoes up there preaching or $1,000 jackets and all that. But anyway, they're trying to look cool and hip. They're still spending that money. They're more than a suit costs. And you're seeing these strange prophets coming about. They get 99 out of 100 prophecies wrong, but they still got a humongous, giant following. And you find ministries that's feeding off to Trump. Popularity. And at first they said Trump's going to be president again. He didn't become president, so they're like, well, he's going to be president. They're going to overturn the election. And they didn't overturn the election. And they're like, well, 2024 he's going to be president. And man, they've got followings, them guys do, and they'll tell prophecies all the time. I don't even know if they got one right yet, but they still get a following. And then you're just like, man, does anybody just want biblical truth anymore? Why do we have to have gimmicks and games to get people interested in the Word of God? And a lot of the popular teachers now, they teach crazy stuff. They're always talking about giants and vampires and stuff that the Bible don't even talk about. Tyler read this morning in Hebrews 1, verse 5. It said, when did God ever call an angel a son? So the sons of God was not angels breeding with men, creating these great big giant beast creatures, and even the art and stuff. It's the art's unbiblical. I look at a lot of the paintings. Half of it, I want to decorate my basement with pictures of biblical scenes because I want to keep it on my mind constantly. And a lot of the paintings are not even biblical. And it just gets frustrating. It's like, man, our culture would do a lot better if we just get back to reading the Bible. And you'll see the famous preachers and teachers now. One guy, he stands like this and does the Spock thing. And Spock will tell you himself, from Star Trek. He said that come from his synagogue that he used to go to as a kid. Now, you'll see the preachers, they'll say, all right, church, we're going to bless you. And they'll do their hands like that. And they'll say some kind of Jewish blessing. Now, listen, that come from post-Jesus, Pharisaical Zionism that has nothing to do with Christianity. It was people that didn't even believe in Jesus. Carried on. Okay, and then you had them. Now, I seen a church the other day. I was watching a Facebook Live video. Before they even prayed, they all had to put a blanket on their head with the Zionist whatever. I looked it up. That is post-Jesus, whatever them towels are, whatever. That is post-Jesus, Pharisaical traditions that was passed on. Now this went into the church. Has nothing to do with Christianity. And I'm just like, man, well, we're just getting so far away. We're dropping Santa Claus out of helicopters and airplanes and all that to draw people. And even food, giving food out. Now, you think, that's biblical. But Jesus told, after feeding the multitude, he sent a lot of them away. He got rid of a lot of them. He said, you're not following me because of the power of God. You're following me because I kept your stomachs full. And then we read in, I think it's 1 Timothy 5, Paul told the people, he said, don't even, widows are not even our responsibility. If they've got a family, let the family take care of them. Where it's if you don't take care of your own, you're worse than an infidel. That comes from talking about widows. He said it's not for the church to take care of them unless they have no family. They had to be over 60-year-old, and they had to be real holy up to the time they turned 60-year-old, and they had to be real holy after they had. Then the church was able to take care of them, and meaning that the God's money was used for godly things, not to keep people up. So I don't know. I mean, it's just we're getting so far away from the Bible to try to win the world. And I heard a lot of churches say, so we don't try to appeal to the saved, we try to appeal to the lost. Meaning that they go worldly to win worldly people. Well, this church here is for saved people. We are trying to learn the Bible. We're trying to learn like Christians and be like Christians. And we might not ever be the most popular place around, but we want to be biblical. We want to stand on the foundations of God. And before I stumble and stutter and trip all over my words, the meaning of this message is I want to draw at Faith Rim Church, not to be a bunch of gimmicks. Now, we have food on Wednesday. Now, we never done that to draw people. We used to have Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesdays, and Thursday nights was just an extra night. Well, we'd have fellowship with food, and then we'd have a Bible study. We started out just having a Bible study only, and I said, it needs something. And we used to go, some of my friends and family stuff used to go to these people's house on Thursday night, and they'd cook a good food, and people bring cookies and drinks and stuff, and we'd eat, and then we'd have Bible study after fellowship, and it was fun, and you felt the Spirit, and it was good knowing God's people. It's actually biblical. That's what they did in the New Testament. The New Testament church, they met every day in people's houses. They had food, and they had Bible study. So I said, that's a good idea. Let's just bring it here. We'll have food on Thursday nights, and when we cut out Thursday nights, we went ahead and just moved the food to Wednesday. But we never done that to draw people. We just done that for fellowship and fun, and I'm not going to cut it out. I like doing that. But I want to draw here to be the power of God. I want to draw people here want to come here because God's here, because the Spirit is moving. It's because we love Him and God is working in our lives. And we see God working in our lives. But we always got to seek for more. And it's very biblical to seek after the spiritual gifts. Behind Sean is a power outlet. And I brought one of the best electricians I've ever seen in my life here, and he couldn't figure out where in the world the wires was running to. And he put his test in there, and it's supposed to be 120 watt, but it's 70. Yeah, and so at being 70, we need to get it up to 120. And it's just kind of like us, I want us to be at 120. Jesus was on earth. He was like 200. He's supposed to be in 120. He was like 200. But I want to get us as close to God. I want to see God move. And I want that to be what draws people in here. I used to be a promoter. I could try all that stuff. That don't work. I want the God to draw people. What drew Jesus? What drew people to Jesus to listen to Him? Every time you read Him preach or teach, there was always power of God moving. That's what drew the people. His preaching wasn't what drew the people. It was the power of God. That's what I want to see here in the church. But I'm entitling this, and if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw. Let me read that again. And if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. So we lift up Jesus here, and we really get down to business and our worship and our lifestyle outside of church and in our prayer and live good, righteous lives. You're going to see God moving. more in this church. And if Jesus is lifted up, it will draw men. You could read the great movements of God. Where did the Methodist Church and the Baptist churches and the Presbyterian churches and the Pentecostal churches, where did they come from? What started them? Why do you see them in every town all over the place? I promise you it didn't come from giving out balloons and popsicles to people. It came because there was a power of God. It came because the preachers weren't trying to look like a movie star, a rock star, a wrestler or something to win people. It's because they went out there and they preached the word of God. And I'm telling the church here, if there's things you want to do from God, don't let the devil talk you out of it. Don't let other people talk you out of it. Most of all, don't let yourself talk you out of doing what you need for God. Quit making up excuses. Let's read this right here. This is Apostle Paul. Wrote 13 books of the Bible. I don't believe there's ever been a Christian on earth that ever had the accomplishment and worked as hard as Apostle Paul did. When he was a Pharisee, he worked harder than any Pharisee at being the best Pharisee. When he converted Christianity, he wanted to do the same. He worked very hard. He was willing to be put in jail. He was willing to do whatever it took. And no doubt, anybody had to be crazy to say that Paul the Apostle didn't have any accomplishment in Christianity, didn't have any fruits in Christianity. And let's read about how Paul's natural ability, natural talents was. You know, there's a lot of preachers out there. They got talent, they got skill, and thus far they got drawing power. But that talent and skill, behind the scenes, you get to know them. They're just as heathen as anybody else. They chase just as much women as any rock star out there. You hear a lot of music bands. You know, it's happened ever since I've kept up with Christian bands and musicians and stuff. You know, they couldn't make it in worldly music, but it's good enough, a little bit better than most Christian artists. So they made it in the Christian field or whatever, and they become great famous Christians musicians, and they travel the world and they had great talent, but behind the scenes there's drugs, behind the scenes there's running around women. Ray Boltz, anybody remember Ray Boltz? What he sang, the anchor holds, I pledge allegiance to him. He's down there laid up with some man, homosexual, in Florida right now, and you know, that's how a lot of them were living behind the scenes, but they had talent. And I remember one time a bunch of young preachers was going to a church I went to, and we was getting to preach this place, this apartment complex on Tuesday nights, and they was switching us out. And the best preacher of all of us, I mean, the guy could preach and light it up, man. I mean, he had a talent. He had everybody all riled up and shouting and hollering and going on, and walked right out the door with his girlfriend and was living in a fornication lifestyle. And the church was telling me, said, you and him need to get together and start a jail ministry. And I kindly said no. And I didn't tell them why, because of gossip, but I'm not teaming up with some guys out chasing women and stuff and preaching. But that goes on. And that's not very common, though. Most preachers are doing really good. You'll never hear their name. You'll never know a thing about them. The ministers that got everybody had anything to do with me getting saved. It wasn't famous at all. The preacher preached a sermon when I got saved. He wasn't. If I'd said his name, I say it wouldn't be one person in here to know him. People would come and talk to me and help me to get bold enough to come to the altar and get saved. Probably nobody knows them. The men standing around me in circles crying was a burden for my soul. A lot of people never, once they pass away, and their family pass away, they'll never hear of their name again. And that might be us. But still, we might not ever be famous. But still, it don't mean that God's not using us and God can't use us. We might not have the best talent, but that don't mean God can't use us. Let's read about Paul right here. And I, brethren, I came to you, came not with excellent speech or of wisdom, declaring to you the testimony of God. For I determined not to know anything among you, save Jesus Christ him crucified. And I was with you in weakness, fear, and much trembling. And my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but in demonstration of spirit and power. And that's what I'm trying to get at. But he had no talent at all. Verse 5, that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Paul got his prayers answered. Paul was very close to God. Paul worked in the signs and wonders and miracles. But one thing that prayer that Paul never got answered was, hey, God, I want to be a better speaker. I want to be a better orator. I want to use great words and great speech. But God never gave him that talent. God used a man, he said right here, he was weak, feeble, nervous. He didn't have excellency of speech. He come to town just as common Joe as anybody. And his talent, that way nobody, and God will be able to say his talent wasn't what won people to the Lord. It was the power of God. It wasn't Paul's talent that drew people to God. It was the power of God that drew people to God. One preacher that I know, and I used to help, people might think I'm jealous and stuff because I criticize these guys so much. You don't realize I've helped them behind the scenes. I've helped them in public. I've supported them before. I get real disappointed when I find out how a lot of them live or how a lot of them do. But I told one guy, one of my friends, I said, you need to listen to C.T. Townsend. I said, he's one of the best preachers I've ever heard in my life, one of the best preachers ever lived. I have no dirt on C.T. Townsend. Go ahead and get that out of the blue. And so my friend said, man, I went home and I binge watched C.T. Townsend. I listened to everything I could find on the internet. I said, you're right, he's great. But he said, I've heard every one of them sermons preached before by another preacher. So another preacher built his ministry watching C.T. Townsend and preaching his sermons to a group of people. Everybody said, boy, he's really great. No, he's a plagiarizer. And he used money from the past, anyway, just a lot of tricks and schemes. And anyway, but that man's talent is what was drawing people to him. It wasn't the power of God. But Paul is the power of God. Let's go to Moses. You read the Old Testament. I mean, he was like Jesus. Just power, miracles, signs and wonders. I just followed Moses everywhere he went. This is Moses right here in Exodus 4. Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I'm not eloquent, neither hereto nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech, slow of tongue. You know what that's saying? He wasn't a good speaker. Moses was not a great orator. So a lot of people believe he stuttered, he mumbled and stuff. And the Lord said to him, who hath made man's mouth, who maketh the dumb or deaf or the seeing or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be in thy mouth and teach thee what thou shalt say. So God's telling him, hey, you're the way you are because I made you the way you are. You go out and you preach with your mouth slow and your stuttering lips. And they even had Aaron. Aaron was really his mouthpiece. His brother Aaron was really the one that would speak for Moses most of the time. But God's like, I know how you speak. I made you that way. I birthed you that way. I can change that any time. If God can split the Red Sea and make the ground dry for the children of Israel to walk through, then he could have easily gave Moses the best sounding preaching voice, the best sounding singing voice, the best talent he could have done. But God didn't want people to be brought to him through man's talent. God wanted people to be brought to him through his power. Am I making any sense today? I really want to get that across. I want God's power to be what draws people. And Jesus himself. We see these pictures right here. It's like I told you, it's hard. More than likely, their skin tone was probably about 10 shades darker, to be honest with you, if you're from the Middle East. That's why it's hard. I can't get into any biblical art. He's always a good-looking guy. He's always got long clothes on, too. Like, you can see it dragging like a wedding dress behind him. And he preached against having long robes and long clothes and all that. Was his hair long? Who knows? They weren't allowed to cut it short, actually, in the Old Testament. They weren't allowed to round it off in the back or sides. But, who knows what he looks like? We really don't know. But Isaiah 53, the whole chapter is about Jesus. And it gives you a little hint about his appearance. Remember when they come to arrest Jesus and Judas had to betray him with a kiss? You know why? Because he didn't stand out in the crowd. He didn't look no different than anybody else did. If he had the long robes, it was better looking. I mean, look at the disciples in that picture right there. A lot of them look like they're 80-year-old. They were like in their 20s or something. All of them were. They were young men when Jesus was around. But anyway, he said, who hath believed our report, and whom hath the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root of a dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, And when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. So that's saying Jesus Christ wasn't this great, beautiful, great-looking creature walking around looking like Brad Pitt with a long robe on preaching to everybody. He said he had no good looks. He had no comeliness. He was just an average-looking man like the rest of us. But what drew people to him? It was the power of God. What done the signs, the wonders, the miracles, and salvations? It was the power of God, not man's talent. Not man's appearance and not tricks and games. You know, one ministry, they're preaching that real popular, and I haven't kept up. I don't keep up with silly stuff. I mean, if it's silly, I have no reason to waste my time. But every now and then, I want to go back and look and just see what's going on. But one ministry, you know, talking about Trump and everything. Now, listen, I like $1.50 gas. I'm not bashing him because all the news bashed him 24/7. I'm really not bashing him now. But they were saying that they were preaching sermons and prophesying that Trump's the new Moses. And they're calling Trump Moses. Moses didn't build his wealth on gambling casinos. I'm sorry. Trump's not Moses. You might like him. You might hate him, but he ain't Moses. He ain't no prophet sent from God. But anyway, people buy into all this silly stuff. I had friends tell me about a prophet woman who would come to churches, and they'd sit and laugh about all the things she got wrong. She gets like 9 out of 10 things wrong, but yet they book her at their church. Yet everybody goes and sees her and everything. I'm like, man, if they get that much wrong, that's obviously telling you, wake up, people. Quit following silliness. Quit following crazy stuff. That's why we don't see power of God anymore, because we let everything slide. We let everything go.
That's right.
Mark 2. And he again entered to Capernaum after some days, and it was noised that he was in the house. So what's going on here? Jesus is in Capernaum. He's hanging out in the house. He's in town. People was getting word of it, and they wanted to be there. And straightway many were gathered together, insomuch that there was no room to receive them, no, not so much as the door. And he preached the word to them. And they came unto him, bringing one sick of the palsy, which was born of 4. And when they could not come nigh to him for the press, they uncovered the roof where he was. And when they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the sick of the palsy, "Sorry, thy sins be forgiven thee." What's going on here? They come, and what's drawing people to that house? It's Jesus, the power of God. And while the power of God's drawing them, Jesus is like taking advantage of it and preaching to them. I want the power of God to be what draws people to this church. And when they get here, our preachers need to be studied up, holied up, fasted up, prayed up. Our teachers, same thing. Our singers need to be ready to roll. And I tell you, a lot of you singers are making up excuses. We need singers here. You don't have to sound like Celine Dion to sound here. The most anointing I've ever felt from Christian singers was a lot of them and didn't have no talent. They wouldn't be on the radio at all. They wouldn't be on make a CD or nothing. But when they sing, you felt the Spirit of God. You felt God moved. And a lot of people, I ain't trying to bash or be mean. If you never want to do a thing the rest of your life and just want to come here and sit in pew, fine, come here and sit in pew. But we need people to step up. I mean, look at Ezra. Ezra's got a gift. He can sing. He's a standout. He needs to be up here singing. Ezra, you're hurting us by not being up here singing. Jenny, you're hurting us by not being here singing. Chuggy, you're hurting us by not being here singing. A lot of you all have talents. Ariel, you play piano good. You never practice, but you still play. I've never seen nobody like that in my life. You're hurting us, but not those of you with talent. You're hurting us, but not doing what you're supposed to be doing. I know where you're coming from. I used to be that guy. Remember Paul Grisham, you guys? I love Paul. Remember Paul Grisham passed away last year? He'd always come up to me, or a year or two ago. I can't remember. It's been a while. But he used to come up with me all the time. Man, I need you preaching. I said, well, Paul, I'm not really living right. I make up excuses. Next time he see me, I need you preaching. You going to come preach the church? Paul, I'm not really up to it. I'm still a little worldly. He's in a nursing home. Half his mind was gone. Paul, see me? I need you preaching right now. Go ahead. We can call on everybody together trying to get me preaching in a nursing home. I was like, that's the only guy I ever seen in my life that really tried to get me to do what I was supposed to do. So I want to carry that on. I want to be like Paul. If you got something to do, let's do it. Let's get the show on the road. And if you don't, you hurting God's work. Okay. Yeah, before I read this, I want to talk about the gifts of the Spirit real quick. You know, there's 9 gifts of the Spirit that really, it's called the gifts of the Spirit. That means that it's for us to use. Right. One's the word of wisdom. And that's usually if you know something, like, I don't know, I've went up to people before, I've experienced it some, and would tell them something, they're like, how in the world did you know that? Well, I didn't know that. God told me that. I had a lot of preachers and people tell me stuff, there's no way in the world that they would have known that unless God told them. I don't go around nosing in your all's life or anything. I want to see that happening more. I want to see the word of wisdom happening more, the word of knowledge. Again, that's kind of like knowing something. I mean, how many people in here got saved? The preacher's up there preaching, and it seemed like they was just talking straight to you. That's part of the word of knowledge. And then we have the faith. I mean, we're called faith for him. That's a gift if you can really walk in faith. When you pray and stuff happens, and you're walking in that great faith that like Moses and Jesus and all them, that is a gift of the Spirit. We need that. Healings, that's in the Bible. We're supposed to be practicing. We're supposed to be seeing that. That will draw people. I'd rather have people coming because they want us to pray for them and God heal them than Santa Claus dropping out of the helicopter. Miracles, that's biblical. We can't see it. It says in Daniel, the last days, those who are loyal to God will see exploits. That means miracles and everything. I want to see them. Prophecies. I've experienced prophecies some. I told everybody 5 years ago that there was going to be a church here. God was going to do something here. That was a prophecy. It happened. It come to pass. I've seen prophecies that work. I've seen prophecy come back, but I sure seen a lot of junk out there. I sure seen a lot of fake out there. Sure seen a lot of fortune cookie type prophecies that could, what horoscope type prophecies. And there's one prophet on television that was getting real popular. And another preacher called him out and said, man, you go to there was a famous psychic, and she'd make 10 predictions every year. And he noticed that famous preacher would the prophecies he would make would almost be word for word that psychic's prophecies. And he's like, look, you got a famous prophet that's getting his prophecies from a psychic. Be careful, people. That's why a lot of people don't want to believe in the gifts of the Spirit, because all this junk that's going on, all these fakers and stuff out there. And then there's discernment. I do believe we walk pretty high in discernment. Discernment ain't always walk up to somebody and go, I just don't have a good feeling about you. Sometimes it's just catching people doing stuff. We catch people doing stuff all the time. But discernment is something the church needs. There's a lot of wolves out there. There's a lot of false teaching out there. There's a lot of people wearing a towel on their head doing that kind of stuff. You need to have discernment. If you read the Bible, you should know we don't do that stuff anyway. You need to have discernment so we don't go the wrong direction. I believe any bad doctor and any bad teacher or false teacher is going to end up people in hell, people taking the mark of the beast and everything. You got one famous preacher out there. He's told everybody, oh, you can take mark of the beast, still go to heaven. That's not what the Bible says. He's out there preaching against prosperity preachers, and yet he makes $1 million a year, lives in a house. Almost they got a meme on the internet and said, man, how dare Joel Osteen have a big house like this? And oh, never mind. It's actually the preachers against Joel Osteen's house. Big giant mansion, swimming pools, tennis courts, and all that. And then we got tongues. That's probably the most abused gift of the Spirit. We hardly ever see it like it's supposed to be in the Bible. It was part of a prophecy. It was part of people of other languages we understand. And now it's just people up there. They believe you ain't got God if you ain't laying in the floor gobbling and stuff. And I'm telling you, Paul said he spoke in tongues more than anybody, but he told people how to use it and not to abuse it. But it's being abused. Nobody wants to do it like the Bible says. They want to show off and think they're better than everybody. You're not. You're breaking the Bible. Thus, we don't see the tongues work like we're supposed to be seeing them. And then Revelation 22, he that's unjust, let him be unjust still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. He is righteous, let him be righteous still. He that is holy, let him be holy still. And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me to give every man according as his work shall be. So your reward will be according to your work. That's red letters. We're going to be rewarded. Now, when we stand on Judgment Day, we're in heaven. We're not going to be standing on Judgment Day deciding we're going to be in heaven. No, we're already there. But we're going to be rewarded by our works. 1 Corinthians 3. This is Paul writing here. Said, I have planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. And that's our job. We might not ever, I've seen salvations here. We've seen salvations. We'd see more if we could get lost in here. There's people out there that's got talent of bringing sinners in the door. Just invite people and people come. There's people, big giant families, have hundreds of friends that would come if we just get them working for the Lord. I've been to churches my whole life. There'd be people come through and just had a gift of getting people through the door. We need that. But we see more people saved. But either way, if we don't see another person saved or here, we just keep preaching. We keep sharing Jesus. There's some countries where preachers never see one person saved, and they preach for 60 years and never seen anybody saved, but yet somebody would come up behind them, and because they planted the seeds, somebody come up behind them and watered. Then another preacher come, and then God will give them the increase. So don't think what we're doing here is void. Don't think because we ain't seeing the numbers like a lot of places are that we're not doing God's work, and we ain't doing the work. But so neither is he that planteth anything, neither he watered, but God giveth the increase. So don't think because some famous preacher does an altar call, thousands of people come down, that he is the one that did it all. And so it was the work of God used by hundreds of different people, thousands of different people. Seed sowed here, seed sowed there. I know Christmas, for example. That's one time a year you'll hear Jesus sung about. Everywhere you go to shopping mall, you hear Jesus sung about. You go dollar store, Jesus sung about. Everywhere you go, you hear Jesus sung about. I like that. Of course, we could have just had Christmas about Jesus. Of course, we want to add stuff to it, the elves and Santa and all that stuff, But now he that planteth and watereth one, and every man shall receive his own reward according to his own labor. So is that not clear? Jesus said we're rewarded by our works. He said we're rewarded according to our own labor. For we are laborers together with God. You're God's husbandry. You're God's building. According to the grace of God which is given to me as a wise master builder. I have laid the foundation, another buildeth upon. But let every man take heed how he build upon. Now Paul's work carried on here. We're here today because of Paul's work. Paul never got to see the future. Paul never got to come to this church. Paul never got to see that the whole earth right now is evangelized, partly because of him and what the work he done. For our foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now if any man build upon this foundation gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubble, every man's work shall be made manifest. For the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire. And the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. If any man's work abide which he hath built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. If any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss. But he himself shall be saved, yet sold by fire. And what that's saying, one day, you're not going to be held accountable to me. I don't care. It's your business. It's your life, your business. One day, we're all going to be facing God. One day, we're all going to be facing the judgment day, just like the Bible says here. Our works are going to be tried. Okay, let's see what works you did. Let's put them to the test. Some of them's going to be like gold. You burn gold, guess what happens? It turns purer. It turns better. You burn silver, guess what happened? It's not as valuable as gold, but it becomes purer and purer. Some is going to burn. It's going to be hay and stubble. And some people, on judgment day, you're going to cause a big old giant bonfire in front of God. And that don't mean that your soul is lost. I mean you're going to hell. That just means that you had opportunities to do great things for God. That's why we're here. People's like, why are we here? What are we here for? We're here to serve God, do what he wants us to do. That's exactly why we're here. That's the answer to life. Why are we here? Serve God. Do what he wants us. Now what we want to do, you start doing everything. You start the pangs that our body has, our desires our body wants, our mind. I don't care how holy you get. You're going to be tempted and tried and everything. Your flesh is going to be at war. Paul was holy. He talked about his battles with the flesh and the war of the flesh. You'll always have that. But if your flesh wins, you're going to walk into a big old mess. If the Spirit wins, the Holy Spirit wins, God wins, you're going to accomplish things for God. You might not ever see what you accomplish in this life. You might think that you just preached yourself. Noah preached. I think nobody got saved but his kids and their wives. But what happened? Because what Noah did, the whole world is an example for the whole entire world. Noah didn't see billions of people after him reading about God's blessing on him for his being faithful. What Noah seen, nobody listened to him, everybody got killed. And we might not ever see great things, but it don't mean great things ain't happening. Don't mean God's not moving. And that's my message today. I hope everybody got something out of it. And I'll try to shut up here.